The evening began with a quiet tension Emma did not fully notice at first, because her life was often filled with movement and thought, and stillness sometimes hid its meaning from her. The cafe in downtown Seattle was warm, softly lit, and familiar, a place where she and Daniel had shared many calm conversations, but tonight something felt different, as if the room itself was waiting. Outside, rain tapped gently against the windows, blurring the city lights into long streaks of silver and gold. Emma sat upright, confident as always, her coat folded neatly beside her chair, her phone face down on the table, unread notifications waiting. Daniel sat across from her, hands wrapped around his coffee cup, his shoulders relaxed but his eyes thoughtful. He had been quieter than usual, listening more than speaking, and Emma assumed he was tired from work. She talked about her day, about a new opportunity at work that might take her to another city for a few weeks, about people she had met, ideas she was excited about, plans that came naturally to her because she had always lived forward, never waiting. Daniel nodded, smiled when appropriate, but something in his silence felt heavier than before. When she finally paused, noticing his gaze linger on her face, he took a breath that seemed practiced, as if he had been preparing for this moment all evening. He asked her, gently and without accusation, where she thought they were headed, not demanding certainty, just truth. The question surprised her, not because she had never thought about it, but because she hadn't expected him to ask so directly. Emma believed in honesty, believed it was better to speak clearly than to let confusion grow, and she also believed in herself, in the life she had built, in the many paths open to her. Without fully weighing how her words might land, she answered with the truth as she saw it, telling him she didn't think he could handle a woman with options. To her, it meant independence, strength, a full life that did not shrink for love. To her, it was not an attack, but a boundary, a statement of who she was. The moment the words settled between them, she felt something shift. Daniel did not react the way she expected. He did not laugh it off or argue or try to prove himself. Instead, he grew still, as if her words had clicked into place, something he had been carrying quietly for a long time. His eyes softened, not with hurt, but with understanding that felt almost sad. He leaned back slightly, setting his cup down, and for a brief moment the sounds of the cafe seemed louder, the clink of dishes, the low hum of conversations around them, the rain outside. He told her he was tired of competing, not with other men directly, but with an idea, a feeling that he was always trying to earn his place in her already full world. He spoke calmly, explaining that he admired her strength but felt himself slowly disappearing beside it, not because she pushed him away, but because he didn't know where he fit. Emma tried to respond, tried to explain that she never wanted him to compete, that she only wanted a partner who stood beside her, but the timing felt off, the moment already slipping through her fingers. Daniel stood, polite and composed, thanked her for being honest, and said he was done competing for a space that might never truly be his. When he turned and walked toward the door, Emma felt a sudden tightness in her chest, a feeling she rarely allowed herself to name. She watched him leave, expecting him to pause, to look back, to give her a chance to fix what had just broken, but he didn't. The bell above the door rang softly as he stepped out into the rain, and Emma sat there alone, realizing that the truth she had spoken so easily had cost her more than she had expected, and that sometimes strength, when spoken without care, can sound like distance instead of invitation. Daniel walked out into the cold Seattle rain with a calm face, but inside his thoughts were loud and restless, moving faster than his steps as he headed down the street without a clear destination. The night air felt sharp against his skin, grounding him, reminding him that leaving was real and final, not just a pause meant to teach a lesson. As he walked, memories surfaced quickly, moments he had brushed aside before because he wanted things to work. He remembered the way Emma's phone often lit up during their dinners, the way she spoke easily about future plans that didn't always include him, not out of cruelty, but habit. He remembered how proud he felt of her and how small that pride sometimes made him feel at the same time. He had never wanted to change her or slow her down, but he had quietly wondered where he stood in her life, whether he was a partner or just someone walking beside her until something better appeared. Her words in the cafe had not hurt because they were sharp, but because they confirmed what he had been afraid to admit to himself, that he was trying to earn certainty in a place where uncertainty was already accepted as normal. To Daniel, competition was not about other men directly, but about constantly proving his value, showing he was enough in a world where Emma already had many options, many directions she could go without him. He realized he had been measuring himself against invisible standards, working harder emotionally than he ever had, hoping that consistency and care would eventually give him solid ground. As he crossed the street and watched cars pass, he understood that love should not feel like an audition, and that choosing to leave was not a failure, but a way to protect the parts of himself that were growing tired. Meanwhile, Emma sat alone at the cafe, replaying the moment again and again, realizing too late how differently her words had landed. She had meant strength, not superiority, but she could now see how easily confidence could sound like distance to someone who only wanted reassurance. She stared at the empty chair across from her, noticing details she had ignored before, the way Daniel always waited for her to speak first, the way he listened fully, the way he rarely asked for more even when he needed it. She felt a mix of confusion and regret, not because she doubted her independence, but because she had assumed the right person would simply adapt without needing comfort. As the cafe slowly emptied and the staff began to clean around her, Emma realized that Daniel had heard exhaustion in her words, not challenge, and that he had walked away not out of anger, but clarity. At the same time, Daniel reached his apartment, hanging his jacket by the door, the silence inside pressing in on him as he sat on the edge of his bed. He told himself he had done the right thing, that stepping away from a situation that made him feel replaceable was an act of self-respect, yet his chest felt heavy with what he was leaving behind. He missed her already, missed the way she laughed without holding back, the way she dreamed out loud, but he also felt a strange sense of relief, as if he had finally stopped running a race no one had officially asked him to join. That night, both of them lay awake in different rooms, thinking about the same conversation from opposite sides, each understanding something new and painful, that love can fade not from lack of feeling, but from misunderstanding, and that sometimes people walk away not because they care too little, but because caring has begun to cost too much. The silence that followed Daniel's departure grew louder with each passing day, filling spaces Emma never knew could feel so empty, and though she stayed busy, moving through meetings, dinners, and long walks through familiar streets, everything felt slightly off, as if the world had shifted without asking her permission. She told herself she was fine, that independence had always been her strength, yet she found herself reaching for her phone at odd moments, expecting a message that never came. Mornings felt rushed, nights stretched too long, and even small choices reminded her of him, from the coffee she ordered to the route she took home. She noticed how often she replayed their last conversation, not to defend herself, but to understand him, and slowly the meaning of his words settled deeper. She realized Daniel had never asked her to give up her options, only to make room for him without making him feel like one more possibility among many. Friends asked about him, and she answered vaguely, not ready to admit that certainty had slipped through her hands because she assumed it would wait. Meanwhile, Daniel filled his days with routine, early mornings at work, evening runs along the waterfront, conversations that stayed light and distant. He avoided places that reminded him of Emma, yet she appeared in his thoughts without effort, in quiet moments when no distraction was strong enough. He reminded himself why he left, how heavy it felt to always wonder if he mattered enough, how draining it was to measure his worth against a future that never fully included him. Still, absence did not erase care, and he missed the way Emma challenged his thinking, the way she made the world feel larger. Some nights he sat by his window, watching the city lights flicker, questioning whether protecting himself meant losing something real. Emma, on her side, began to notice a pattern in her past, how often she mistook self-reliance for emotional distance, how rarely she slowed down enough to let someone feel chosen. She didn't regret who she was, but she regretted assuming that love could exist without reassurance. One evening, she returned to the cafe alone, sitting at the same table, listening to the same soft sounds, and for the first time she allowed herself to feel the weight of the loss without explaining it away. She understood then that having options had never been the issue, but making someone feel like they were not just an option had been. Daniel, walking home that same night, passed the cafe without looking in, unaware she was there, both of them orbiting the same memory from different sides. Neither reached out, not because they didn't care, but because pride and fear stood quietly between them, shaping the space where love once lived. As days turned into weeks, the distance taught them both something painful and honest, that silence can teach lessons words never do, and that sometimes what is lost is not love itself, but the courage to say, clearly and in time, that someone truly matters. The day they met again did not feel planned, yet both of them sensed something pulling them toward the same place, as if unfinished words had weight and direction. Emma had gone to the waterfront after work, needing air and space, watching the water move steadily forward while her own thoughts felt stuck, and for the first time she was not thinking about options or plans, only about honesty. She leaned against the railing, coat pulled close, replaying weeks of silence that had taught her more than years of certainty ever had. She understood now that strength did not mean standing alone all the time, and that love was not something that simply kept up with her pace, but something she had to meet halfway. At the same moment, Daniel walked the same path he had taken many times since leaving, his steps slower than usual, his mind quieter, having accepted that missing someone did not mean returning without truth. When he saw Emma standing there, his first instinct was to turn away, not out of anger, but caution, yet she turned before he could decide, their eyes meeting with a mix of surprise and relief that erased weeks of distance in a single breath. Neither smiled right away. They stood still, letting the moment settle, aware that whatever came next needed to be real. Emma spoke first, her voice steady but softer than before, telling him she finally understood what he had heard that night, that she never wanted him to feel like he had to compete, that having a full life did not mean she wanted a full distance between them. She admitted she had confused independence with emotional safety, and that in protecting herself, she had made him feel optional. Daniel listened without interrupting, noticing the difference in her words, not louder or more convincing, but clearer, and when he spoke, he did not accuse or defend, he simply told her he didn't need to be the best choice among many, only the one who was chosen without doubt. He explained that leaving had not been about winning or losing, but about refusing to stay where his presence felt uncertain, and that caring deeply should not feel like standing on unstable ground. Emma nodded, understanding that love without reassurance becomes quiet fear, and she told him she was not asking him to chase or compete, only to stand beside her knowing he belonged there. The city moved around them, people passing, water flowing, life continuing, yet the space between them felt focused and still. Daniel took a step closer, not to promise forever, but to acknowledge truth, and he told her that choosing someone meant showing it, not assuming it would be felt. They spoke honestly, without rushing forgiveness, agreeing that what had broken was not love, but understanding, and that repair required time, not pressure. As the sky darkened and lights reflected on the water, they stood together, not certain of the future, but no longer avoiding it. This time, no one walked away, not because everything was fixed, but because both had learned that real connection is not about options or competition, but about choosing each other clearly, calmly, and without fear of being replaced.